The morning sun fell gently over the college campus, spilling golden light across manicured lawns and tall brick buildings. Families swarmed the walkways, dressed in suits, dresses, and caps of all colors, chattering and laughing as graduates in their gowns rehearsed last-minute lineups. Among the throng, one man walked with quiet dignity, his posture perfectly straight, his steps measured and deliberate. His uniform was not the traditional one worn in ceremony, but the way he carried himself, broad shoulders, firm gait, eyes alert yet calm, commanded a presence that was unmistakable. Marcus Johnson, retired United States Marine Corps Master Sergeant, had been up before dawn. His morning had been ritualistic, shaving meticulously, pressing his dress shirt, polishing shoes until they reflected the world above them. Today was not about medals, ribbons, or formalities. It was about a promise he had made to his son years ago. Marcus had raised his boy to value honor, perseverance, and self-respect. He had instilled in him the courage to pursue dreams, no matter the obstacles, and today, that courage would be recognized. Today, his son, David, was graduating. Marcus paused at the edge of the quad, surveying the crowd. Families milled around, pointing cameras, gathering loved ones, chatting excitedly about caps, gowns, and speeches. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, sunscreen, and ambition. He adjusted his jacket and clutched the program in his hand, scanning the seating chart. His assigned section was just a few rows back from the stage, a perfect vantage point to see his son cross the platform. He felt a swell of pride, the kind only a parent could know, not for the diplomas, not for the ceremony itself, but for the journey that had brought them here. His son had grown from a curious child asking endless questions about history and the universe into a young man with a purpose and determination that mirrored Marcus's own. He remembered late nights helping David with homework, answering questions about leadership, resilience, and life. He remembered the times he had sat by David's bed after nightmares, whispering, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it." And now, here he was, about to be recognized for all of his effort. Marcus began walking toward the entrance to his section, keeping his head held high, but scanning carefully. While his pride ran deep, so did his awareness. He had spent years in environments where respect was earned and assumed, where vigilance was as natural as breathing. Even in civilian life, he carried that sense of situational awareness, always noticing exits, patterns, and potential conflicts. Today, that awareness would be crucial. As he approached the seating area, a few families glanced his way. Some smiled politely, nodding in recognition, perhaps sensing the aura of military discipline. Others stared blankly, unsure what to make of him. Marcus kept moving, ignoring the stares and whispers. His focus was singular: see his son graduate. Nothing else mattered. He reached the aisle that led directly to his row and paused, checking the seating assignments. Each ticket was printed carefully, assigned by row and section. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. With a measured breath, he stepped forward and began to make his way to his seat. That's when he first noticed them. Two men in crisp security uniforms stationed near the aisle, eyes fixed on him. At first, he thought it coincidental. Security often watched the flow of people, ensured everyone was in their proper sections. But as he neared his row, the men's attention became pointed. One of them straightened, shoulders rigid, as if preparing for confrontation. "Excuse me, sir," one of the guards called out, voice carrying across the nearby benches. Marcus stopped, calmly turning toward them. "Yes?" he asked, polite but firm. "You're in the wrong section," the guard said, gesturing vaguely toward the far end of the stadium. "You need to leave. Now." Marcus blinked. "I have a ticket assigned to this section." "See." He held up the program, pointing to the printed seat assignment. The guard's jaw tightened. "That doesn't matter. This is restricted seating. You can't stay here." Marcus's posture didn't falter. His voice remained even, controlled. "I'm here for my son's graduation. I have every right to be in this section. I have a ticket. I've been assigned this seat." The second guard stepped forward, towering slightly over him, as if his height alone would intimidate. "Sir, you need to leave before this gets out of hand." Marcus inhaled slowly, keeping his emotions in check. He had faced far more dangerous situations than this, in far harsher environments. He knew the value of patience, of measuring a response rather than reacting in anger. He simply repeated, "I'm not leaving. I'm in my assigned seat." A small crowd of early arrivals had begun to notice the tension. Whispers rippled through the nearby audience, questions and uneasy looks thrown Marcus's way. Some faces carried curiosity, others discomfort. At that moment, a young man in a cap and gown walked past the entrance, laughing with friends. Marcus recognized him immediately. His son, David, checking the order of the line, unaware of the confrontation about to unfold. Marcus's chest tightened with a mix of pride and protectiveness. He could not let anything interfere with his son's moment, not petty intimidation, not baseless authority. He straightened further, shoulders squared, eyes steady on the guards. "I am a retired Marine," he said calmly, letting the weight of those words carry their meaning. "I've earned the right to stand where I am, and I will not be removed on the basis of intimidation." The guards exchanged a glance, their confidence wavering slightly. Marcus could sense the uncertainty behind their posture, the realization that he was not the type to back down easily. He turned his attention to the ceremony area, scanning for the stage where David would soon appear. In the background, the choir began to warm up, the sound carrying across the stadium. Families arranged cameras, graduates adjusted caps and gowns, and Marcus felt the familiar pride of a father witnessing the culmination of years of hard work. As he took his first step toward his assigned seat, resolute and unyielding, he knew one thing. He would not let this moment be stolen. His presence here was not just a personal victory, it was a statement, one that would reverberate far beyond these benches, beyond the ceremony, beyond the murmurs and stares. He was a father, a Marine, and a man who had faced far greater challenges than two security guards questioning his right to attend his own son's graduation. And today he would not be moved. The crowd settled, the stage lights gleamed in anticipation, and Marcus Johnson prepared to claim his rightful place in the audience, where pride, honor, and justice were already quietly assembling behind him. The tension in the air hinted that this day would be remembered, not just for the diploma being awarded, but for the courage and dignity of a man standing firm when confronted with injustice in plain view. And with that, Marcus stepped fully into his seat, eyes forward, calm but unshakable. The day, and the confrontation, was just beginning. Marcus Johnson had barely settled into his assigned seat when he noticed the guards closing in. Their approach was deliberate, the kind of posture that screams authority and intimidation. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a tightly pressed uniform, blocked the aisle, while the other flanked him slightly behind, clipboard in hand. Marcus's eyes narrowed, not in fear but in assessment. He had faced threats in the desert sands of Iraq, in the dense jungles of training exercises, and even during tense deployments where the wrong step could mean disaster. He had learned to read a situation within seconds, to sense when someone underestimated him, and these guards clearly had. "Sir," the first guard said, his voice firm, projecting authority over the murmurs of the audience. "You're in the wrong section. You need to leave." Marcus remained seated, calm, his gaze steady. "I'm in the right section. My ticket shows this seat. I am here for my son's graduation, and I will not leave." The guard's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm asking you nicely. Leave now, or we'll have to escalate this situation." Marcus inhaled slowly, keeping his composure. His mind ran through his options carefully. Argue further, comply and leave, or hold his ground. Leaving would mean conceding to unfair intimidation, an unacceptable outcome on a day meant to honor his son's achievements. Arguing further might escalate the situation, but he knew that calm, controlled words often carry more weight than raised voices. "I am calm," he said, evenly. "I have every right to be here. Please check the seating chart or the ticket assignment if there's any confusion." The second guard stepped forward, clipboard raised. "We've already verified. You don't belong here. You'll need to move now." Marcus leaned slightly forward, his eyes meeting theirs with a quiet intensity that made a few audience members glance up. Gentlemen, with all due respect, I am in my assigned seat holding a valid ticket. I am a retired Marine. I have served my country. And today, I am here to see my son graduate. I will not be removed without cause. The mention of his service caused a brief pause. The crowd around them started whispering, some turning their heads, curiosity piqued by the visible tension. Yet the guards remained unmoved, either by arrogance or ignorance. The first guard's jaw tightened. Sir, this isn't about your service. This is about security protocol. If you do not leave, we'll have to physically remove you. Marcus's heart remained steady. He had been trained for far worse than a couple of security guards at a graduation ceremony. I am asking for a fare review. Check the ticket, verify my seat. I will remain here peacefully while you do so. The second guard's hand hovered over his radio. Marcus noted it, a potential call for backup. The threat was implicit, but he did not flinch. His calmness, the firmness of his posture, and the unwavering focus in his eyes communicated that he would not be intimidated. A few nearby families began to whisper among themselves. Some were uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene. Others stared, admiration flickering across their faces as they recognized the quiet dignity in the man refusing to be bullied. The first guard's tone shifted slightly, a mixture of impatience and irritation. Sir, you're forcing us to do something we don't want to do. Step aside, or we'll escort you out. Marcus responded with the same steady cadence. I am in no way obstructing anyone. I am seated. There is no reason to escort me anywhere. I am not a threat. I am here to witness my son's achievement. That is all. The guards exchanged a glance, realizing that their usual tactics, intimidation, loudness, the implied threat of authority, weren't having the desired effect. Marcus wasn't reacting with fear or aggression. He wasn't being compliant, but he wasn't escalating either. He was simply standing, or rather, sitting firmly in his right. At that moment, one of the onlookers, a fellow parent, muttered under their breath, "He's a Marine. You can tell by how he carries himself." The word spread quietly through the immediate crowd. Marcus caught a few approving nods from strangers who respected military service, while the guards stiffened, suddenly aware that their actions were being scrutinized more broadly than they had anticipated. The first guard stepped closer, lowering his voice, but with a hard edge. I don't care who you are, sir. You still need to move. Marcus's response was calm, almost conversational. I respect your position, but I cannot leave without cause. You may verify the seating arrangements and consult the event coordinators if you wish. I will remain seated here until proper clarification is provided. The air in the audience became charged. Whispers multiplied. Cameras discreetly shifted toward the confrontation. Some of the graduates glanced back, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The second guard's grip on his clipboard tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus's steady gaze held him in check. Marcus's presence was commanding, not aggressive, not threatening, but undeniably firm. He projected a quiet authority that comes from experience, discipline, and unwavering self-respect. A small voice from the crowd, perhaps a faculty member, called out, "Sir, may I see the ticket?" Marcus handed it over politely. The guard took it, eyes scanning quickly, then looked back at Marcus, their previous certainty now faltering. This ticket, it does check out, the first guard muttered, his tone losing some of its authority. Marcus leaned back, composed, the tension in his body easing slightly but maintaining readiness. He knew that victory wasn't yet secured, but he had achieved the first important step, remaining seated without escalating to confrontation or physical removal. The second guard, visibly frustrated, muttered something under his breath before stepping back slightly. It was clear to Marcus that they were reconsidering their approach, yet the presence of the guards alone, the implied threat, still hung over the proceedings, a reminder that prejudice and assumption could appear in even the most celebratory of spaces. Marcus's thoughts drifted briefly to his son. Backstage, preparing for the moment that should have been pure joy. "Hang in there, David," he whispered under his breath. "We'll get through this." And in that quiet resolve, Marcus Johnson embodied everything he had spent his life defending: integrity, patience, courage, and unwavering adherence to principle. Today wasn't a battlefield, but the stakes were personal and profound. He would not allow intimidation to rob him, or his son, of this hard-earned moment of pride. The tension in the auditorium was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus Johnson remained seated, calm but alert, while the two guards hovered near him, their posture radiating authority and impatience. Every whisper in the nearby audience seemed amplified, every sideways glance magnifying the pressure. At first, Marcus had hoped this would resolve quietly, with the guards verifying his ticket and stepping aside. But their determination, fueled by arrogance, prejudice, or a mix of both, turned his attempt at a peaceful attendance into a spectacle. "Sir," the taller guard snapped, voice now louder, "you will leave this section. We don't want trouble, but we're authorized to escort you out." Marcus remained composed, sitting upright, his hands resting on his knees, his voice calm, yet unwavering. "I am seated in my assigned spot. I am not causing trouble. You may verify with the event coordinators, who will confirm my ticket and my seat. I will not move without justification." The guard's frustration was palpable. He glanced around the room as if seeking backup or support from the spectators. Some were staring openly now, others pretended to look away. Unsure of how to intervene, Marcus noticed a few students exchanging anxious glances, and he realized this confrontation had already started drawing attention. "You think you're better than us?" the second guard muttered under his breath, leaning closer. "You don't get special treatment just because you wore a uniform." Marcus's expression did not change, but the weight of his presence carried authority that no words could diminish. He had faced far worse than verbal intimidation, and he knew that remaining calm in the eye of conflict was often more powerful than any confrontation. "I do not seek special treatment," he replied quietly, voice steady. "I am simply exercising my right to be present at my son's graduation." The taller guard shook his head, clearly losing patience. "Fine. If you won't leave voluntarily, we'll have to remove you." A murmur ran through the crowd. Parents glanced nervously at each other. Some whispered about the injustice unfolding in front of them, while others seemed frozen, unsure how to act. Marcus felt a pang of frustration, not at the guards, but at the idea that this simple act of attending his son's graduation had turned into public humiliation. At that moment, a young woman sitting a few rows behind him spoke softly to her companion. "Is he a Marine?" "Yes," came the whisper in reply. "That's why he's standing his ground like that." The realization began to spread. This was not an ordinary spectator. This was a man trained to face threats calmly, decisively, and without losing control. And now he was being challenged in a way that was both unnecessary and humiliating. The first guard reached for Marcus's arm. "Sir, step aside." Marcus's eyes locked with his, unwavering. "Do not touch me. I am not leaving my seat." The guard's grip lingered for a second, hesitant, and the murmurs in the audience grew louder. People were beginning to notice that this confrontation was more than a simple misunderstanding. Some were taking out their phones, discreetly recording the incident. Marcus's mind shifted briefly to his son, David, backstage, unaware that his father's moment of pride had been threatened. A protective instinct surged within him. He would not allow this petty humiliation to overshadow his son's achievements. He would remain firm, dignified, and in control. The second guard, seeing the first hesitate, leaned in and raised his voice. "If you don't leave, we will physically escort you out." At that moment, a few audience members shifted uncomfortably. Parents whispered urgently, students craned their necks to see what was happening, and the energy in the room became charged. Marcus noticed the rising tension, but did not flinch. He had been trained to stand his ground under fire, and this situation, while different, demanded the same steadfast courage. He spoke again, calm but assertive. "I will not move. My seat is assigned." My ticket is valid. I have done nothing to warrant removal. Any attempt to forcibly remove me will be considered harassment. The taller guard's face reddened. He radioed for backup, and Marcus could see the hesitation in his movements. The usual tactics of intimidation, the looming presence, the raised voice, were ineffective. The calm resolve of a decorated Marine, sitting quietly yet resolutely, was far more powerful than he had anticipated. A few students began whispering among themselves. "Isn't that Mr. Johnson? He's a Marine, he served overseas," the whisper spread quickly, and suddenly the guards were not just dealing with one man. They were being observed by a crowd that was slowly realizing the injustice of the situation. The first guard, frustrated and flustered, attempted to step in closer. "Sir, we're serious. You can't stay here." Marcus leaned slightly forward, eyes steady. "I am serious as well. I am staying here. You may consult with the event organizers or verify my ticket. Until then, any action taken against me will be noted and reported." The second guard's hand wavered over his radio. For the first time, Marcus sensed uncertainty. He could feel the subtle shift in authority, not in himself, but in the room. The audience, the murmurs, the whispers of recognition, they were all allies in this silent battle. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, Marcus noticed a figure rising at the back of the room, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a confident presence. Another followed, then four more. 6 men in total, their posture military, precise, and imposing. Marcus recognized them immediately. Former Navy SEALs, brothers in arms from deployments and training exercises, men who had shared the same hardships and discipline he had endured. They stood as one, silently surveying the situation, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The guards noticed them too. The once confident security personnel stiffened, eyes darting between Marcus and the men at the back. The energy shifted palpably. The audience sensed the arrival of someone with authority far beyond the uniforms of the guards. The first SEAL stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Sir," he addressed the taller guard, "he is with us. He has every right to be here." Step back. Instantly, the room went silent. Whispers ceased. All eyes were on the standoff, and the guards realized they were no longer dealing with just a Marine. They were dealing with a small unit of men who could make them look foolish in an instant. Marcus remained seated, composed, as if nothing had changed. But the guards' confidence had evaporated, replaced by uncertainty and caution. The potential humiliation had shifted. They were the ones now on display. Marcus knew the confrontation was turning. He had maintained his dignity, defended his right, and now, with support quietly manifesting behind him, the power in the room had shifted. He was no longer the target of intimidation. He was the anchor of respect, and the audience could see it. The guards, realizing they had lost control, backed off slightly, glancing nervously at one another. Marcus's calm, steadfast presence, and the silent reinforcement of the SEALs, had transformed a moment of potential humiliation into one of quiet triumph. And while the ceremony had yet to reach its climax, Marcus knew this. He had defended not only his seat, but his son's honor and the principle that courage and dignity will always command respect, even under the scrutiny of those who seek to intimidate. The stage was set. The audience had witnessed the first chapter of confrontation, and the resolution was just beginning. The auditorium fell into a tense silence. The moment the 6 men rose from the back, the energy in the room shifted instantly. They moved with the unmistakable precision of men trained for combat, but what set them apart was not aggression. It was authority, calm, yet unmistakably commanding. The guards, once confident in their role, now felt the weight of history, training, and skill pressing down on them. Marcus remained seated, composed as ever. He didn't need to stand. His presence had always been sufficient. But the SEALs, recognizing the injustice, made their move. The tallest of them stepped forward, his stride deliberate, his eyes locked on the guards. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the whispers and murmurs of the audience. "This man is a decorated Marine. He has served his country with honor. He has a ticket. He is in his assigned seat. Step back." The word decorated hit the guards like a shockwave. Their hands, once raised in a threatening posture, now hung awkwardly at their sides. They had assumed authority in the room, assumed control, but here were men whose very presence commanded respect that could not be ignored. One of the SEALs, a shorter but broad-shouldered man with a closely cropped beard, added in a calm, almost conversational tone, "We're here to witness his son's graduation. We'll not tolerate intimidation or harassment in this space." Marcus exhaled quietly. He had never asked for backup. He had only sought to be allowed to attend his son's ceremony. But the appearance of these men, brothers in arms who had fought alongside him in distant lands, shifted the atmosphere entirely. The confrontation that had threatened humiliation now teetered on the brink of justice. The audience, sensing the gravity of the moment, held their breath. Parents leaned forward, students craned their necks, and a few brave souls quietly began recording the scene on their phones. There was a collective understanding. Something extraordinary was unfolding. The first guard's jaw tightened, his confidence visibly faltering. We're just doing our jobs," he stammered, trying to regain control. The lead SEAL's gaze did not waver. "And your job is to maintain order, not to intimidate or remove people without cause. Check his ticket, confirm his seat, then step aside." The second guard shifted uncomfortably. He glanced toward the program in Marcus's hand and, with a reluctant nod, confirmed what the SEALs had stated. Marcus's ticket, seat assignment, and presence were all valid. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Parents exchanged looks of disbelief, students whispered to each other, and the SEALs stood like statues of authority at Marcus's side. The intimidation that had loomed moments ago evaporated, replaced by respect and, in some, shame. Marcus remained seated, quiet but dignified. He didn't need to speak. His calm was more commanding than any shout, more powerful than any threat. The SEAL's presence amplified that power. One of the guards, now clearly flustered, muttered into his radio. Marcus could see the hesitation, the once confident posture now tense, uncertain, even fearful. He allowed himself a small, inward smile. Patience, discipline, and calm had always been his greatest weapons, and now vindication was arriving not through force, but through solidarity and principle. The lead SEAL leaned slightly toward Marcus. "You okay?" he asked quietly, in a tone that was more brotherly than protective. Marcus nodded. "I've been through worse. Today it's not about me, it's about my son." The SEAL's calm authority seemed to have a ripple effect. The rest of the audience, previously hesitant, began to openly side with Marcus. Whispers became quiet statements of support. "Look, he's a Marine. They can't do that. He has every right to be here." Even some of the guard's colleagues, stationed elsewhere, seemed to hesitate, unsure if escalating the situation was worth the risk of confrontation with these 6 men and the now attentive audience. The confrontation reached its turning point when the lead SEAL stepped slightly closer to the guards and said firmly, "This is not a debate. You will respect his rights and allow him to remain seated. Failure to comply will result in immediate review and consequences." The intensity of his gaze and the measured authority in his tone left no room for argument. The guards, realizing they were completely outmatched, not by physical might alone, but by experience, honor, and the eyes of hundreds witnessing their behavior, took a step back. Marcus's son, David, who had been backstage, now heard the commotion and peered out through the curtains. He caught sight of his father surrounded by 6 imposing figures, and relief washed over him. In that moment, David understood the depth of his father's commitment, not just to him, but to principle, to dignity, to fairness. The SEALs didn't crowd Marcus. They formed a subtle protective line behind him, a silent assertion that anyone attempting to intimidate or harass him would have to contend not only with Marcus's courage, but with their combined presence. It was a masterclass in nonviolent intervention, a display of authority without aggression, power without chaos. Finally, the taller guard muttered something under his breath and stepped aside. The second guard followed suit. They had no choice. The power dynamic had shifted decisively, and everyone in the room knew it. Marcus leaned back slightly, composed, giving the guards no opportunity to further provoke him. The SEALs nodded subtly among themselves, a quiet acknowledgement that the immediate threat had been neutralized. The audience, previously tense and unsure, erupted in murmurs of admiration. Some discreetly clapped, others whispered words of encouragement. The energy in the room had completely transformed. What had begun as an attempt at public humiliation now became a moment of vindication, integrity, and moral victory. Marcus glanced toward the stage. His son's name would soon be called. The confrontation had been intense, public, and potentially humiliating, but Marcus had held his ground, and the intervention of the SEALs had ensured that dignity and respect prevailed. In the crowd, cameras continued to capture the scene. The whispers would become stories, the story would become legend, and the courage displayed by one man and the intervention of 6 more would be remembered by everyone in that auditorium for years to come. The stage was set. Marcus remained seated, the SEALs flanking him subtly, and the guards, finally subdued, retreated to their posts with lowered heads. The room had been silenced, not by fear, but by principle, honor, and undeniable authority. And in that silence, Marcus knew that his son's moment, his family's pride, and his own dignity were safe. The real lesson had been delivered. Courage, discipline, and moral clarity command respect in any room, under any circumstances. The tension that had gripped the auditorium moments before had evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Marcus Johnson remained seated, calm and resolute, while the 6 SEALs subtly flanked him, their presence a quiet but unyielding shield. The 2 guards, chastened and subdued, had returned to their posts, no longer daring to approach. The audience's energy shifted, a mixture of relief, admiration, and anticipation permeating the room. The announcer's voice echoed across the hall, calling the graduates to prepare. A hush fell as students lined up, adjusting gowns and caps, exchanging nervous smiles with classmates and families. Among them was David Johnson, Marcus's son. He had been oblivious to the confrontation that had unfolded just yards away, but now, peeking through the curtains, he saw the unwavering figure of his father in the audience, seated proudly yet surrounded by men whose mere presence commanded authority. David's chest swelled with pride. The weight of the day's earlier tension dissolved into clarity. His father had endured intimidation, stood firm in his principles, and now, in full view, remained dignified and unbowed. The sight made his nerves calm. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his cap, and stepped forward toward the stage. As David began his walk, whispers rippled through the audience. Parents leaned forward, students craned their necks, and a few faculty members exchanged knowing glances. Everyone sensed that this was no ordinary graduation moment. This was a son's achievement magnified by a father's courage and a public demonstration of respect earned through service and integrity. Marcus's eyes followed every step. Each stride his son took toward the stage carried with it years of hard work, late-night studying, and the quiet support of a father who had taught him discipline, perseverance, and honor. Marcus allowed himself a small inward smile, but otherwise remained composed. His pride was visible not through gestures or words, but through the unwavering calm that radiated from him. The SEALs, standing subtly behind and beside Marcus, shared brief nods among themselves. Each recognized the symbolic importance of this moment. Their intervention had ensured that David's graduation would proceed without humiliation, and now, as the young man walked confidently toward the stage, their presence underscored the principle that courage and integrity would always prevail. The audience erupted into applause as David approached the stage. It started softly, an instinctive acknowledgement of achievement, but as recognition of the earlier confrontation spread, the claps grew louder, more emphatic, almost reverent. Some parents stood, cameras raised, capturing not just a milestone in their children's lives, but a moment that symbolized resilience, dignity, and moral courage. David reached the edge of the stage, where faculty members helped him step up. The announcer called his name, and the audience cheered. Marcus's heart swelled, a powerful mix of pride, relief, and vindication. His son, the young man he had guided and supported, was receiving his diploma in front of hundreds of witnesses, and the earlier attempt at intimidation had only made the triumph sweeter. As David shook hands with the dean and accepted his diploma, Marcus felt a rush of emotion he could not suppress. He rose slightly in his seat, not in anger, but in pride. The applause in the auditorium intensified. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and the whispers among the audience transformed into murmurs of admiration. That's his father? Wait, he's a retired Marine? No wonder he didn't back down. Marcus allowed a rare smile to grace his face. His son turned slightly, scanning the audience, and their eyes met. In that brief, silent exchange, years of guidance, support, and mutual respect passed between them. No words were necessary. The pride, love, and acknowledgement were unspoken, but unmistakable. The SEALs subtly straightened, noticing the moment's significance. Their intervention had been discreet, yet decisive, ensuring that a father could witness his son's achievement without fear or disruption. Their presence, while physically unassuming, had carried a weight that few in the audience fully understood but all recognized intuitively. David descended the stage after the ceremony, diploma in hand. Families gathered around, taking photos, offering hugs and congratulations. Marcus rose fully from his seat now, approaching his son with steady steps. The two embraced, a moment heavy with relief, pride, and the unspoken acknowledgement of what had transpired just moments earlier. The audience erupted in applause again, not just for the graduate, but for the father whose composure, courage, and moral authority had ensured the day proceeded without injustice. Faculty members and other parents approached Marcus, offering quiet congratulations and expressions of respect. "You handled that so well," one parent whispered. "I don't know how you stayed so calm." Marcus nodded, his pride tempered by humility. "It wasn't about me," he replied softly. "It was about my son." The SEALs moved to stand beside him, not obtrusively, but in quiet solidarity. Marcus acknowledged them with a brief nod, a gesture of gratitude and camaraderie that spoke volumes. Their role in the day's events had been crucial, and yet, true to their training, they had remained understated, letting Marcus's dignity and resolve take center stage. David, now surrounded by family and friends, glowed with pride. The earlier tension, attempted intimidation, and the threat of humiliation had transformed into a public affirmation of respect, courage, and principle. The graduation walk, which might have been overshadowed by confrontation, instead became a defining moment, both for David and for everyone who had witnessed it. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus walked alongside his son, the SEALs subtly following behind. Whispers of admiration continued to circulate, and the two guards who had attempted to remove him remained at a distance, their earlier confidence replaced by quiet acknowledgement of their misjudgment. The balance of respect had shifted irreversibly, and the audience knew it. For Marcus, the significance of the moment went beyond the diploma. It was a validation of years of dedication, a demonstration that courage and dignity could withstand intimidation, and a reminder that standing firm for what is right commands attention and respect. The graduation walk had not only honored his son's achievements, but had also cemented a broader lesson. Integrity, honor, and calm resolve in the face of injustice can change the energy of a room, influence the perception of a crowd, and ensure that truth and dignity prevail. As Marcus and David exited the auditorium, arm in arm, the applause followed them, a testament not just to an academic accomplishment, but to a father's steadfast courage, a son's pride, and the unspoken power of respect earned through service, principle, and unwavering composure. The moment was complete. Triumph had been quietly, yet decisively delivered. The ceremony had ended, but the echoes of applause and admiration lingered in the air. Families began filing out of the auditorium, some still holding cameras, others engaged in quiet conversations. For Marcus Johnson, the gravity of what had transpired earlier in the day was still settling. The confrontation with the guards had been intense, public, and humiliating in its intent, but the intervention of the 6 SEALs had restored dignity not only to him, but also to the space of the ceremony itself. As Marcus stepped into the hall's lobby, his son, David, walked beside him, diploma in hand, a grin stretching across his face. "Dad, thank you," David said, quietly squeezing his father's arm. I didn't even know how close it got back there. Marcus nodded, his own pride swelling but tempered by humility. You don't have to thank me, son. Today was about you, and nothing should have stood in the way of that. The 6 SEALs followed at a respectful distance, exchanging nods with Marcus. Their presence remained understated, a subtle reminder that the chaos of confrontation had passed, but the principles of solidarity, respect, and brotherhood endured. One of the men, the tallest of the group, spoke quietly to Marcus. You handled yourself perfectly, he said. That's how a Marine does it. Calm, precise, unshakable. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Couldn't have asked for better backup. Meanwhile, the 2 guards who had attempted to remove Marcus were being discreetly escorted by their supervisors. Their earlier bravado had dissolved into awkward silence. The security director approached them, a stern expression on his face. Gentlemen, the director said, voice low but authoritative, we've reviewed the footage. Your actions were inappropriate. You will be formally reprimanded and retrained immediately. Effective immediately, all attempts at intimidation or harassment of attendees will not be tolerated. The guards shifted uncomfortably, realizing the severity of their misjudgment. The lesson had been clear: authority is not absolute, and abuse of power has consequences. Word spread quickly through the campus and among attendees. Parents who had initially been hesitant to intervene approached Marcus and David, offering congratulations and words of respect. I just want to say, sir, that was incredible, one parent said. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't fight, but you commanded respect. Marcus nodded politely. Thank you. I only stood my ground because it was the right thing to do. Other graduates and their families approached as well, some shaking Marcus's hand, others taking photos. The recognition was not merely for the moment of defiance, but for the embodiment of integrity, courage, and patience. The audience had witnessed more than a graduation. They had witnessed an example of leadership and moral authority in action. Even faculty members who had initially been unaware of the confrontation approached Marcus. The dean, shaking his head in quiet disbelief, said, I want to personally apologize for what happened. No parent should have been treated that way, and you handled it with remarkable dignity. Marcus accepted the apology graciously, understanding that the focus remained on his son's achievement. Yet he also recognized the broader impact. The incident had illuminated the importance of respect, equality, and accountability. David, buoyed by the support and admiration surrounding his father, felt a new surge of pride. He realized that the lesson extended beyond the classroom, beyond the diploma in his hand. His father had demonstrated courage, resilience, and the quiet power of standing for what is right. The SEALs remained nearby, providing subtle support without overshadowing Marcus or the family. Their professionalism and presence underscored the idea that true leadership often involves quiet intervention, ensuring that justice and respect are upheld without unnecessary spectacle. As Marcus and David exited the auditorium, the energy in the room shifted from tension to admiration. Other attendees discussed the event quietly among themselves, recognizing the integrity and courage demonstrated. The story would undoubtedly be shared beyond the campus, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of intimidation. Later, as the crowd dispersed and families gathered for photos and celebrations, the campus security team conducted a thorough review of the incident. The guards involved were placed on probation, required to undergo additional training in conflict resolution, cultural sensitivity, and professional conduct. The administration emphasized that harassment or intimidation would no longer be tolerated, reinforcing a culture of accountability and respect. For Marcus, the resolution of the situation was both personal and symbolic. Personal because he had protected his son's graduation day from being overshadowed by prejudice and intimidation. Symbolic because it demonstrated that integrity, courage, and calm resolve can command respect even in the most challenging circumstances. In the quiet moments afterward, Marcus sat with David by the fountain outside the auditorium, reflecting on the day. You handled yourself well today, son, Marcus said softly. I hope you understand that the lesson here isn't about confrontation. It's about dignity, patience, and standing firm when you know you're right. David nodded, absorbing the weight of his father's words. I do, Dad, and I'll remember it. Always. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting warm, golden light across the campus. Families were taking their final photos, laughing, hugging, and celebrating achievements. Marcus looked out over the quad, satisfied that justice and respect had been restored. The day, which had begun with tension and potential humiliation, had ended in triumph, affirmation, and restored honor. Even the 6 SEALs, quietly observing from the edge of the crowd, seemed to share in the satisfaction of the outcome. Their role had been discreet yet decisive, ensuring that the values of courage, integrity, and respect were upheld without the need for escalation or spectacle. Marcus stood, placing a hand on David's shoulder. Together, they walked toward the exit, the applause and admiration from the audience still echoing faintly behind them. The confrontation had concluded, the lesson had been delivered, and respect had been unequivocally restored. As they left the building, Marcus realized that moments like this, moments where courage and integrity are tested, are rare but unforgettable. Today had been more than a graduation. It had been a demonstration of moral fortitude, a lesson in leadership, and a public affirmation that dignity and respect are earned, defended, and recognized when they matter most. The campus was quieting now, families departing, students reflecting on their achievements, and Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. He had ensured that his son's day remained untainted, that the principle of fairness had prevailed, and that those who sought to intimidate had been held accountable. And in that moment, Marcus Johnson understood fully that respect, once earned and defended with dignity, is never forgotten.